how did VP and publisher of Forbes Woman, Moira Forbes, build her powerhouse brand for influential women? Find out on today's Innovator Interview with Lipstick Unplugged. Hey, this is Dee. Welcome to Lipstick Unplugged. This is your no-gloss business branding show that helps women entrepreneurs gain the confidence, resources, and mentoring that they need to change their lives in the world through entrepreneurship. So this is the first interview that I recorded actually at the local radio station, but because I'm recording this video afterwards, so you'll see some changes in lighting and those types of things. I'll always experiment, but this is a no-gloss show, so that's fine. This interview is with Moira Forbes, who's the VP and publisher of Forbes Woman, which is a different brand than Forbes.com. Moira had to gain internal support for Forbes Woman because she saw the need to have a separate resource for women leaders and women entrepreneurs. And she's really taken her passion for women in entrepreneurship and growing themselves financially and really put it into the brand. So we talk about how she built her online platform and how she started off using Twitter. And she answers some really great questions that I had that I think you might have those same questions too. So I hope you enjoy this one, and I'll see you on the other side. So today we have on our show Moira Forbes, and she's the president and publisher of Forbes Woman. Now, Forbes Woman, if you haven't heard of it, is a multimedia platform that's dedicated to successful women in business and leadership. And Moira is the host of Success with Moira Forbes, and that's a video series on the Forbes Video Network. She does one-on-one interviews with today's top women leaders, people in politics, celebrities, and women like you and me who've started businesses and really achieved a high level of success. So during a recent interview, I was just speaking with Moira about this. One of my favorite interviews was an interview that was actually done of her by the dean of Kaplan University. And Moira said, at the end of it, they asked about the favorite part of her job. And I was surprised by the answer, but I also understood. And she said that she loves bringing the stories of these amazing women who have overcome all sorts of obstacles in life and just their journeys of where they started from, and then where they are now. So I thought that that really said a lot about her, because she also said that when you talk about your failures and the things you've overcome, that's when the essence of who you are comes out. So welcome to the show, Moira Forbes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
No, absolutely. And so we were talking earlier about the Forbes Woman online community and the platform that you built. And really what I wanted to do was take the audience through that journey, because I think a lot of times when we start our platforms, we're told as entrepreneurs we need to, build a platform, build a community, build an audience. But how do you do that? And in your case, it was also in a family-owned business that already had a direction, so there might have been some additional challenges for you. So could you take us back to 2008, when you started? Was it your idea to build Forbes Woman, or how did that come about?
It was a combination of a lot of different individuals looking at opportunities to say, what's the higher purpose of Forbes? We're really rooted in entrepreneurship and enabling individuals to not only achieve success, but enjoy their success. And when we looked at the different groups of our audience, and when we looked at the different needs and where we felt there were voids for voices and the unique perspectives that are the DNA of our brand, it really became clear that there was an opportunity to go deeper into the women's space. And personally, it was extremely important to me. I had spent a lot of time, obviously, in the media world, started my career at Forbes, but I felt that there wasn't necessarily a media property that spoke to me personally, a media property that brought together like-minded individuals. When I say like-minded, I don't necessarily mean from the same industry, background, age, and the like, but people who all want to grow and want to achieve success however they define it. And what are all the different dynamics? What does that look like? How do you achieve it? What are the challenges along the way? And how can we provide a platform, and as you mentioned, a community to harness the dialogue and convene dialogue around critical issues and be able to move conversations forward in ways that empower our audience. And, I always say that your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was very fortunate of, and one of the strengths of being at Forbes, is we have an incredibly powerful brand, one that's, almost 100 years old. Magazine was started by my great-grandfather, and really entrepreneurial roots. He was an immigrant from Scotland. And as I mentioned before, we're all about helping people achieve success. And one of the core pillars in the DNA of who we are is entrepreneurship. So it was very, very fortunate in the sense that we had a strong brand. I think, like anyone, you face challenges and obstacles. And I mentioned every strength is sometimes your greatest challenge or where you have obstacles. And it was interesting for me, even though we had a huge community of female business leaders who come to Forbes for critical information and perspectives, it was interesting to see people's perception of still business being dominated by men. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to hear how much feedback that we received around business and leadership and entrepreneurship being so male-dominated, when the flip side, we'd seen so many successful women, small business owners, entrepreneurs, women rising up the ranks. So it was an interesting learning for us in seeing a huge need and seeing a huge response from our audience, but also sometimes people not necessarily always thinking of women and business, and not necessarily seeing all the positives and the growth that's being made, as opposed to just the challenges that women face. So I would say, while that wasn't necessarily an obstacle in the traditional sense, it was really enlightening to me to see how people looked at women's ascendance today.
And so in your answer, you were talking about branding and how you already had the Forbes brand, but Forbes Woman hadn't been branded. And you'd mentioned in a prior interview, an interview that you'd done, about how you really like social media. And that was one of the things that was also changing in 2008, about how if I'm a woman entrepreneur and I want to build my message, social media gives me the opportunity to amplify my message and to be transparent and authentic. So how did Forbes Woman shape that message, because you can't just rely on the Forbes brand, correct?
No, I think it's again, first and foremost, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur, you're working in philanthropy or nonprofits or in business, the first and foremost, you need to have a higher purpose for what you're doing. You need to have a mission above and beyond the products that you sell. What role are you serving in people's lives? How are you fulfilling the wants and needs of individuals? And so having that strong brand and the higher mission for what we were doing really helped focus us in terms of what's the lens in which we're looking at the dynamics of women in business and leadership today. When we talk about social media, though, I think so often I hear from entrepreneurs this almost love-hate relationship to social media, in the sense that when you're starting out and when you're just entering and dipping your toes in the water from a social media perspective, that term is so vast and means so many different things that you don't even know necessarily where to start. You know you should be doing it. You don't necessarily know what tools, which platform, how to begin, and there's no shortage of people telling you what to do. So I think first and foremost, what's your higher purpose? What need are you filling in people's lives? Even if it's just a product or service that may be, commercial product, it does have a higher purpose in terms of what it's doing for people's lives and why they want to engage in it. And that's, I think, fundamental for social media. Two, I think so often when we think about social media, it's the what do we want to, what should we do versus going back to Business 101, Marketing 101, what role do we want to have social media play? What does success look like from a social media perspective? Why is this tool important? So going back to the fundamentals, what do you need to accomplish in your business? What role do you need social media to play? How does it fit into your larger strategy? So going back to the fundamentals. And I think what I would say is when you're starting to build a community, first and foremost, I would start small. Mm-hmm. As I said, it's like an ocean. Start small. What's one platform, one initiative that you want to do? Don't go out and have 50 things you want to accomplish. Start small. Focus. Once you start to master that and allow yourself some bumps along the way, some iterations, some learnings in terms of how you constantly revise your strategy and the like, then you keep moving forward. Start small, play around, and I think one of the also most critical things is be authentic. Today, more than ever before, leadership and power is really defined by influence, technology, connectivity, and that connectivity really being turbocharged by technology today. Never before has it been more important to engage in a one-on-one way with individuals. Mm-hmm. Easier said than done, but authenticity is at the core of that. It's never been easier to attain influence and to build a voice, and I think that's extraordinary, but at the same time, it's never been harder to be able to maintain that voice with people today.
Yeah, and so I want to capture that.
And be authentic.
So you mentioned here that, first of all, when we're building our platforms, and you mentioned this previously, you really have to have a plan. You mentioned that in a previous interview, because sometimes people just jump into entrepreneurship and they don't have the end in mind. So once you have your purpose, you really need to decide on what role you want social media to play in your platform and in building your platform. And then I really like your advice, and I agree with it. And it's one of the things that's been paining me because, people are saying be everywhere, be on, Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and it can be really overwhelming.
So overwhelming. And you're sort of, and they say the expression, a mile wide, an inch deep. And I sometimes feel that given the scope and, how vast even the definition and what we think of as social media, and more importantly what we think of as building communities, it's overwhelming and intimidating, and often we don't necessarily have the greatest ROI in our time that we're putting in to figure out and be successful in leveraging these new tools.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head when you said there were a lot of people are trying to track their metrics in different ways and how successful they are. So there's two things that you said. One was this authenticity. That comes up a lot. And I'll tell you one thing that scares me about authenticity is that I have a strong personality and strong opinions, and then some people, maybe they feel, they're not an extrovert. They're kind of an introvert, and you mentioned that you're an introvert. So when you don't have this big personality, or let's say you have a strong personality or you're really opinionated, it's kind of scary to put yourself out there and be judged by others, or maybe be seen as, not the nicest person or not the most entertaining person. So what do you think about that, and what can we do as entrepreneurs in that space?
I think you're right, and you hit the nail on the head also when you said it can be incredibly intimidating. And I think people often see it as, well, what do I need to do? I need to promote my business, my products, but do people really want to know what I ate for breakfast? And so, again, it seems so vast. So I think first, understand and remember that social media is a tool. What role do you want it to play? And then backtrack from there in terms of what is that mission, and what role does your product, does your service, does your business play in the lives of people, and what role do you as a voice, as a female entrepreneur, play in from a social media perspective? Are the platforms and tools you're using used as a business tool, marketing, new client acquisitions, retention, and the like? Or are you developing a voice as an expert, or as an ascending entrepreneur, or someone who wants to build a community with other like-minded entrepreneurs navigating the experience? Sometimes they're one and the same. Often they're different depending on your business, and they're definitely not mutually exclusive. For me, different social media platforms were incredibly intimidating. I wasn't necessarily someone who thought, why would people want to know what I think about this or that?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they necessarily, why would I sort of tell them something personal? It didn't necessarily make sense to me. So I had a week off from work, and I was sitting on the beach, and I just started playing around on Twitter. And first I just took a lay of the land, and what I found was that was a way for me to connect with people in terms of branded voices. And I also found that the more time I invested in it, the more I got out. It's where I get my news every day. During the hurricane, it was Irene. It was the only way that I could communicate with my family, know when the subways and when my electricity was going to be on in New York City. I got to know the platform, and I also personally got to know what aspects of me I wanted to share and where my comfort level was. And so that also allowed me to dip my toe in the water. What are the personal aspects that I feel comfortable with? One of the things I love is fast food, but eating it and the business of it, even though my waistline doesn't agree. That was something I love talking about, and it may seem small and mundane, and I'm not tweeting about McDonald's every day, but that was an aspect of me that was authentic, that allowed me to engage with people and have fun with, that was, dipping my toe in the water. And as it relates to feedback and exposing yourself, sure, people are going to have opinions. Sometimes, thanks to the shield of the Internet, people can be snarky or say vicious things.
Yeah.
Often, though, it's really enlightening, people's reactions. You understand all the different pockets of the community that you're building. And from a business perspective, there isn't a single business person, an entrepreneur I know, who hasn't been able to use those tools to really understand their customer. So what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to invest in it? And take the time. Half an hour each day, 15 minutes each day. If it's a priority, what I found is something's a priority, you can make the time, and when you start to get more out of it than what you put in, then it becomes an indispensable tool in ways that I personally never expected.
Absolutely. And so we have about, 3 minutes left here, and I wanted to talk about, kind of go back to Forbes Woman, who you see as a Forbes woman. And there was a really good conversation that you had with Oprah when you interviewed Oprah in September for the Forbes 400, the Philanthropy Summit. And you asked her, and I want to ask you the same question because I love that question. And you asked her how she measures success. And her answer was lives changed. The number, she didn't even blink, the number of lives that she's changed. And she defined that as the trajectory. They're on a certain path, and you impact them by changing their trajectory in a fundamental way. So I wanted to ask you, in kind of this final question, about how you measure success of yourself, a Forbes woman, and then where you're going next with the platform.
In terms of success, I think first you have to look at it from that higher purpose perspective. What do you want how do you want to change the lives or be able to engage with and connect with individuals? And as it related to Forbes Woman, for me, success looked like, how do we convene a platform for incredibly diverse women? Again, it could be an entrepreneur just starting out. It could be a woman in corporate America ascending. But really convening, what are the up-at-night issues? What are the different stories of women making unconventional choices that I can learn from? And I always say that leadership lessons mean so little in the abstract, and it's through the narratives of others that we can learn so much. And the reason why I was so passionate is I realized how much I was learning. So the success really looks like, on a macro perspective, that. And in terms of how we measure it, you do have to say, what does success look like in terms of how we define it from a business perspective? And for us, it was, how do we develop an audience and a community? And that looked like how many people are coming to Forbes.com and coming to Forbes Woman, how many repeat visitors we have, how much engagement are we having with each story, and starting to build metrics around that really spoke to the higher purpose. Not just measuring something for the sake of measuring it, but how does it tie back to that higher purpose?
Wow. So I really appreciate this interview, you taking the time to talk to our audience, the woman on the other end of the line who is walking that path. I think you've said a lot of really great things here. We're going to have it in the show notes. And I also wanted to just make sure we have the site, which is ForbesWoman.com, correct?
Yeah, and you can go to the site, the channel on Forbes.com as well. And I'm so inspired by the women in your audience doing extraordinary things, taking risks that I have such great admiration for. So I would love to have as many women weigh in as possible. For those who haven't jumped on social media, let me know if you've heard this conversation. I would love to hear back from you there as a way to jump in. I've just given the first step, selfishly, that I would love to hear from some of your audience as well as to what are the up-at-night issues for them.
Absolutely, we will. And thank you very much, and we'll see you at ForbesWoman.com.
Fantastic. Thank you.
That's it for today's Innovator Interview. I hope you enjoyed the show. For more inspiring mentor interviews, the show notes, and your Rebel Action worksheet, visit lipstickunplug.com.